Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Feel Good Friday. It is Friday, the 7th of July, and I'm glad that you're with me. Before I begin and head into the Feel Good, I ask your prayers for a young family in Edgerton. On Monday, I will have privilege is not, that's not the right word, but I will be officiating at the funeral for a 5.5-week-old baby boy, and the family is obviously pretty upset, and there's a lot that goes with it. So I ask your prayers for their family, for his family, and um, thanksgiving that he is with God. I truly believe that. But prayers of support and encouragement and pure comfort for those who loved him, and the community who will gather around them, and the priest who will do what no priest should ever have to do. That being said, let's talk about Feel Good Friday. I was reading a book. I think it's called "The Mother and Her and Two Daughters" by Gail Godwin, and there's an image in the book where they're talking about the dad has died, and the family owns a cottage, and they're thinking about renting the cottage out. So the daughters and the mom are going back to the cottage for a couple of weeks in the summer and thinking about what to do with it. And they get to the water, and the two daughters are talking about remembering when they would go into the water. And the oldest daughter was sort of a bit of a daredevil. She would go in and she'd crash, and where other people would sort of, when the wave is coming at you, they would sort of duck into it and allow it to wash over them. She would jump up out of the water and let it crash into her and push her over. And the other daughter was the one who would sort of stand on the beach and walk in until her feet got wet up to her ankles, and then up to her knees, and then up to her thighs and up to her waist. And she would take one step, and then she'd negotiate with herself. If I just go in at the count of three and get all wet and get this over with because it's so cold, I will do X. I will, buy myself a new book, or she'd bribe herself into doing it. I got thinking about those different ways of looking at life, that how we approach the water at the beach says a lot about who we are and how we tackle things. I'm wondering, do we change as time goes on? I, as a kid, was very much that timid sort of, I'll go in up to my ankles and sort of get acclimated, and then up to my knees, and then up to my legs. And, eventually I get so far and it's like, okay, take a deep breath, plug your nose, and drop, drop under the water. I remember doing that when I was probably about 8 years old at Sawwell Beach in Ontario. And this is a beautiful, like, it's a gorgeous beach. And it has these sandbars. Like, you go out so far, and all of a sudden you're in this much water. Like, you might be up to your waist, and next minute you're up to here. And it goes like that forever. Like, it's really, really hard to get out far enough that you can actually swim. And I remember thinking, okay, here I am. I'm going to do it. My next step, I'm going to drop. I'm going to plug my nose. I'm going to drop. I'm just going to get completely wet, and it'll be all over, and then I'll just have fun. So I did that, and I dropped, and I was sitting, and the water was still only up to my waist. I was still freezing. It was like, oh, finally got up the courage, and it didn't work. Um, but as I've gotten older, I don't know whether I just am aware of the fact that I'm going to have to take the plunge one way or another. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better now. Not completely, still can't go out and dive in, with nothing getting wet first. But when we lived at Round Lake, when Rob was posted to Petawawa, we lived on the lake. And the dog do love to swim. So we would throw his frisbee, and he would go and swim after it. But dude was dude. And sometimes he wasn't paying attention to where the frisbee was, and he would swim past the frisbee and just keep on going, and wouldn't hear us or turn around to, like, like telling him to come back. So I would have to go in and kind of get his attention to bring him back, which meant I had to go in faster. I didn't have the time. Um, I didn't have the time to do the whole, let's take 25 minutes to get wet thing in the water. I'd have to go in relatively quickly. And I started realizing that, what, that in my life, the older I've gotten, the more I go in relatively quickly. I'm better at thinking in terms of, okay, what's in front of me? Do I dilly dally? Do I procrastinate? Do I put this off and put it off and put it off? Or do I just dive in? I still don't completely dive in, but I'm not procrastinating nearly as much. But just thinking about that, the sense that how do we approach the water when we go to the beach really does it, maybe it doesn't, but for me anyway, it really does sort of mirror how I live my life these days. Now, there are times when, I would still go to the beach and put up my lawn chair and just have my feet sitting in the water as it was lapping up over my ankles until, I get to that point where I'm ready to get in the water. And then I think I go a bit faster than I would when I was a kid. But there are other times when it's like, just nope, just get out there, you know, put on that bathing suit, just walk straight out there until you drop off the edge and you just dunk yourself under the water and you're soaked. And because you know what happens when you get wet, when you actually get your whole body wet, the water doesn't feel so cold, does it? Isn't that the coolest thing? I mean, I used to dread, like, we had a pool when we lived in Hanover, so I was about 11, 12 years old. We had an in-ground pool. And in the summer, I think my mom kept it at like between 76 or 80 degrees. It was great. She would turn up the heat in the morning, and then by the time we were finished whatever it was we were doing in the morning, we could go out and swim. And it would be nice and warm. And even at that, we didn't have 96-degree weather when, at least I don't think so when I was that age. We didn't, climate change wasn't rearing its ugly head quite so much. And it never felt warmer. Like the water might be 80 degrees and the air might only be like 75. But it was still like, oh, it's so cold, it's so cold. And we would sort of sit on the edge and dangle our feet in the water, even though it was very warm. It then still took me time to dive in. And then once I got warm, I didn't want to come out because the air was colder than the water, or so it felt. I find that like absolutely fascinating because the thing that I dread the most is that cold shock of getting wet head to toe, immersing myself in that cold water and like, it's gonna be awful. And then I realize once I get wet, I don't want to stand up. I don't want to raise my shoulders above the water level because the water feels so much warmer than the air does. And sometimes I think that's the way it is with the things that we worry about in life, the challenges we have. I think about all these people, these sports people who work so hard and they exercise and they do all these things that I think I could never do that. And then they go out and they play brilliantly. The Connor McDavids of the world, the Wayne Gretzky's, the Mario Lemieux, the Sidney Crosbys and Nathan McKinnon's. Like they go out there. It's all hockey references for those of you who don't know. They're all Canadians too, I have to say. Um, but they go out there and they work their butts off. And you look at them and think, how do they do it? How do they have the energy? How do they have the strength? How do they put up the pain of all that work? And then I realize what they're doing is like after I drop into that water, get through that initial shock of like, oh, it's so cold, but then it's so worth it. It's you love it so much you don't want to leave it. And isn't that the way with anything that we're passionate about? Anything that we're truly, truly willing to dedicate ourselves to? That it does take work. Not very often do people just sort of fall into, with no issues, the thing that they're called to do for their whole lives. Most of us do have to put your toe in and then your ankle, or even if you walk straight in, there's still that moment when you realize I'm about to do this and then there's no turning back. And you make that decision because it's worth it. You know that it's worth the no turning back. That moment when you go in over your head and you come back up and realize the moment of freezing water, the moment of pain, the moment of absolute, like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Here we go. That moment, that moment's coming, but you also have a hunch that the moment's going to be worth it on the other side. I think that's an incredible, incredible feeling, isn't it? When you dive in and realize it was worth it and you don't want to turn back. Where have you had those moments in your lives when you have done that whole, toe in first thing, then the ankle, then the knee, or just walked straight in and but still had to face that moment when it was I'm about to take that next step from which there will be no return, but it's worth the risk. What has that moment been for you? Because in my life there have been many moments like that. And well, yeah, I've got regrets and things about my life. I have never regretted what happened on the other side of that risk. The things I have regretted was how long it took me to get to the risk. So as you go about your weekend, as you celebrate Feel Good Friday and enjoy this summertime, as you go to the beach or you go to your pool or your little wading pool in your backyard, whatever it is you're using to keep cool, think about how you approach new things. And it's okay. Approaching something new with a very, slow and steady pace, even a slow and backing off and backing off and backing off and then running forward pace, that's okay. As long as it's true to you. The big thing is, are you willing to take the risk? Because I can't guarantee it, but my hunch is that once you take the risk, you'll be so glad you did. Have a great weekend. God bless you. I will see you again on Sunday for Gospel on the Go and Monday for Church at Home with Rachel. Have a great weekend at the beach or wherever you might be. God bless.